I guess we probably met at a literary festival, or in fact possibly by correspondence, because when I first started reading his books I was living in France, and we would write letters to each other. Can you believe that? Letters. I remember us having a long conversation by mail about this book Trainspotting that had come out, that neither of us had read yet, but we were hearing good things about it. And then of course when I moved back to Edinburgh, it was nights in the pub and nights with curry.
And when was your last night in the pub with him?
It's about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I suppose, and I was quite shocked. There had been a change. He'd lost a lot of weight. He'd had jaundice, so he was quite yellow-skinned, and he did joke about it. He said, you know, a few weeks ago I was looking like Grandpa Simpson. I'm a lot better looking now. He wasn't able to drink because he was on various drugs, so we sat there and drank for him. But he was still full of life, still full of humour. I said to him, I'm sorry I didn't get you a wedding present, because he just married his long-term partner, Adele. I said, but what'd you get the man who's got everything? And he said, well, maybe a cure. But he said it with a kind of, you know, a gleam in his eye and with a smile on his lips. He treated the cancer with the same lack of respect and the same humour with which he treated life.
And this suffering from cancer, this will feature in what turned out to be his last book, which is going to be published in the next few weeks.
Yeah, and he didn't really want to speak about that in the pub. He wasn't giving away the game about what the book was about. He was just thrilled that his publishers had brought publication forward so that he would be alive to see it. I think we all thought, him included, that he was going to have a few more months than he eventually did. We were planning to have a celebration of his life at the Edinburgh Book Festival in August, at which he was going to attend. And in fact, on Tuesday, Adele and him were told by doctors that he still had a few months. And by the Wednesday, things had deteriorated to such an extent that he was on full-time medical care from then on. So it was a very cruel end, because he'd been told on a Tuesday he still had months to go. He was going to see publication of that final book.
And Iain, was he an influence on you at all? The reason I ask you that is you're from the same part of the world, very close together, where you were both born and grew up. I mean, but he was the senior guy, 6 years older than you, and you're there in the same business. Did you look up to him?
I did. I mean, I was very jealous of him in some ways, because he seemed to be able to straddle these different genres. He was a world, you know, recognised science fiction author, so he could turn his hand to science fiction. Then he could go and do what he called a straight novel, a literary novel, and then the next year he would go and do another of his culture novels, these novels set in the future, about a race way away from Earth. And he had this fantastic fan base that seemed, you know, the closest I can come is somebody like Robert Louis Stevenson in history, who could write children's books, who could write poetry, who could write travel books, who could write adult novels. And Iain had that. He had that unquenchable curiosity about the world, and a childlike imagination and excitement about language and what language could do and what it could tell us about the world. And that never left him right up until the very end.
Well, that paints a lovely picture there you have with those words. Louis Stevenson. For me, Treasure Island probably was the first book that made a lasting impression on me, and that's a tremendous legacy, of course, to give to the world.
Well, he was also very lucky, because he was one of the last writers I can think of whose work was taken from the slush pile. The slush pile is manuscripts that pile up in publishers' office that haven't been asked for; they're just sent on spec. And he did that with The Wasp Factory. And the readers who read it for the publishing house, some of them hated it and some of them loved it, and that intrigued the publisher, and he decided to take a punt. And I think these days publishers are much more risk-averse, and they probably wouldn't have taken a punt on a book that so many people loathed. And when it came out, the reviews were harsh, to say the least. And Iain, with typical humour, decided to put all the bad reviews on the paperback.
Very good. There he is, a son of Scotland. How proud is Scotland of him, and what sort of send-off will he get?
Well, there's going to be a few drinks. His friends and fellow writers will be having a few drinks from now, probably for the rest of the year. The Scotsman newspaper today, the Edinburgh newspaper, the whole front page is a picture of Iain. I mean, that's how much respect he was held in up here. He was one of our great writers. He was the first Scottish writer I remember ever being on the Granta Best of Young British Writers list. And again, I was very jealous of that as well. But I'll remember him as just a great guy to hang out with, a great guy to go for a pint with, and a great guy to sit down and have a chat with over a curry.